going on, my friends? I'm Rick, as you're seated at the table, right? And we are, of course, sitting in my mobile office. I'm currently parked outside of a Hy-Vee in Osceola, Iowa. I'm a little ahead of schedule to service the place. It's about 50-minute drive south of Des Moines, about a half-hour, 40-minute drive from the Missouri border kind of place. Anyhow, I recently got a comment on one of my older videos that I posted about a year back. It was second edition's The Complete Barbarian's Handbook, I believe, right? Anyway, so it says izzycat at izzycat2148. If you're lending money to that extreme, do you still award the keep that they receive at level 10 if they don't have the economy to support it? What's the incentive to embrace the milestone? Hey, you know, that's one of those things that's a really excellent question, and one of those, sometimes, you know, I like to cover everything I can, and I fall woefully short on that. There are the obvious Monty Haul sessions and tables where you get everything handed to you hand over fist, and you literally can go down to any village has a magic shop where you can buy potions and spells and magic items, and apparently everybody's walking around with a small treasure trove of loot to divvy out, when in reality it never works out that way. The economy of a sword and sorcery setting, let alone a high fantasy's got more money available than sword and sorcery, in my opinion, and it's concentrated in very tiny locations. Very few people have the bulk of the stuff, right? So what we talk about is having sessions where we limit how much loot is given out, and I call it an austere campaign. And ideally, you're going to have that discussion on session 0 with your players, so everybody's on the same page and understands that not everything is going to be hand over fist and bucket loads of coin. And I point out, if you go look at the Dungeon Master's Guide of any of the older editions, I do not know if it's in the current 5th edition or whatever. I don't care enough to go look. I just know that it is in past issues. They give you an idea of what the average town or village would have money-wise. And if you consider that a thorp is less than, you know, I don't know, 10, 20 families, if that, a village isn't much bigger than that, maybe the entire village together could pool enough gold pieces to fill a 50 gold piece sack, maybe, in a town of 200 or 300 people. That's going to be rare. And so you have to get up to bigger and bigger towns. This is why I like the city campaign so much, because if you're in a big enough city, for example, you know, Waterdeep from Faerun or Coruscant in Star Wars, money, the lack of stuff to spend money on is not the issue anymore, right? So what we're trying to avoid, though, is giving players this false identity. More is better. So in the case of izzycat's question about how do you keep the milestone in, so when a character, specifically a fighter, hits 10th level, one of the things that's supposed to be you know, available to them is property, is the ability to set out and start their own keep, if you want. Now, okay, obviously, and if you have a Monty Haul campaign where you've got more loot than you know what to do with, that's not a problem. You just got to go out and buy the damn land. But in reality, it doesn't usually play out that way. Generally speaking, you'd have to go to a minor country where the ruling rulers will have no problem selling you a chunk of property that's going to be, you know, a landed noble position. I mean, it's not always guaranteed, is it? Now, if you want to talk about as a milestone, that in and of itself is a milestone. So if the characters are pursuing enough good deeds and good works, one of their rewards is the local land, you know, the land management people, and whether it's the, you know, a king or a baron or a city councilor or whatever, will grant your character as part of their reward for some great thing or deed that they've achieved or accomplished for the village or the kingdom as a whole. And in doing so, you get the land provided to you at no cost because it's a grant from the king or whatever. You also become, in some cases, entitled, which means from there on out, your character's future family members will have the advantage of being landed noble people. Probably a squire or a thane, nothing major. You know, the idea that you're going to be made a baron or a duke right off the bat is ludicrous. That sort of stuff comes with connectivity and time, and usually generations worth of effort. It isn't just something that you can tap out. It's like certain kinds of magic items, extremely rare, and the idea that you can just buy them anywhere is retarded. Just like ideally finding one in a treasure trove should be very hard, i.e. they're rare for a reason. There shouldn't be hundreds of them available. You should not be able to walk out and buy your +5 Holy Avenger or Vorpal Sword or Staff of the Magi at a local pawn store. If you're going down that avenue, I think you're doing a disservice to your players and to everybody else at the table. When you do a very austere campaign, what we mean is keeping the money real and tight, realistic, where silver pieces are where most people treat gold pieces in their campaigns. That's a mistake. Like I said, the lion's share of working people, tradesmen, bar owners, tavern owners, things like this, they're not paid in gold pieces on a regular basis. They're paid in silver and copper and brass, and not a lot. And then they have expenses too, i.e. they got to keep themselves fed, got to keep a roof over them and themselves, their families, and go on and go on and go on. So the question you have to ask yourself is, how much largesse do you want to have in your campaign, and is it necessary? And the keep thing is an interesting topic by itself. You ever notice at the OSR version, you go to the old school stuff, it's just fighters. It's just fighters that get to have a keep, right? There was a time when the idea was that your thief might start a thieves guild at some point. Well, that involved them being in a city big enough to support more than one thieves guild, or the thieves guild, or taking over an existing one. Your rangers, i.e. if you've read any of the early books from Drizzt Do'Urden series in Forgotten Realms, there's part of the book, and I can't tell you off the top of my head which novel it is, where Drizzt spends most of the year or two in the camp of a old blind ranger, and the ranger at some point says, "What are you going to do when I'm gone? And this is not your place. This place is not for you. Your place is out there and yet to be decided and determined." But the point I'm getting at is that milestone applies to just about every cleric or class out there. The cleric is supposed to contribute money to their church and their faith, and on the grounds that eventually they will build a church someplace. The magic user, the wizard, will build a wizard's tower someplace in a laboratory and spend more and more of their time researching things and developing spells and less time in the field, right? To get there, you need a coin. You need some money. But that's not always necessarily true. Once again, the wizard gets to a certain level and does enough good deeds, they can be awarded the land and the money from the crown to build a tower. And of course, it's going to be in a place that's going to be advantageous to the crown. Ideally, here we have a nice town out here that's going to be a city someday. Let's go ahead and put your tower there next to Joe's keep over here, right? And so this mindset was that part of your leveling up is to have an exit strategy. That's something I think gets lost on a lot of players today, and it has for decades. I mean, this is nothing new. That the end of the day, our characters are fleeting, and sometimes people will dial into that, and you'll have multi-generational campaigns where the grandchildren of the original players' characters are now the characters that are in action, and they remember the tales and the stories and whatever. And at that point, you've got generational wealth building, possibilities. The other scenario on that is that as your character gets more capable, as they level up, the reward increases. That's kind of part and pair. Yeah, but you have to you ought to measure. I am of the opinion that you should measure what's needed to achieve those milestones versus what's excessive and retarded. So when you find yourself in finding a dragon's lair that's really worth tens of millions of gold pieces in value, when you add all this stuff into it, you now basically become one of the richest parties in the area, if not in that quarter of the world, depending on if you're talking sword and sorcery or you're talking high fantasy or something else. I mean, that's just realities of the way the world works. How do we keep our characters and how do we keep the players engaged? Well, if they're not engaged by having less and having more, learning to do more with less, then change the campaign and don't use this idea, this philosophy. I've done it a number of times, and it does have a payout. It does have a different vibe to it. One being that you don't take for granted your resources. And a lot of players get to that point where resources are not an issue anymore. They don't even track them anymore. That's kind of part of some of the videos I've done over the last couple of years when we talk about what's good for the city or for the players and what's not, and what's good for the table, and whether or not in the long term you're being reasonable. It's like that player that wants to have 7 long swords. Why? Why do you need 7 damn swords? You can't use 7 damn swords, and they take space, and they have weight to them. You're collecting them to sell them to make money. Well, then that's because you're in one of those situations where it's worth saving that stuff and selling it, because that's why one of the reasons why it has value across the board, in my opinion, anyway. Are they easy, these campaigns? Not necessarily, no. And once again, some things are meant to be a challenge for experienced players. That's when I talk about the term of being a veteran player. Sometimes you have done and seen and played many possible outcomes. The challenges become part of that issue. How do we continue to make these sessions challenging and entertaining for people who have seen it all and done it all, or damn close to doing all of it, right? You have to make yourself weigh the advantages and disadvantages to that. So yeah, the keep can be awarded because it says it right there in the book. That's one of those possible ways to get the keep. Another possibility would be you take over an existing keep from somebody who did something bad. So, i.e., your venturing party goes out and goes on a campaign against a evil landlord or evil wizard or whatever, and at the end of the day you're successful and you've defeated the big bad. Now there's that wonderful big old mansion or castle or magic tower with all of the bells and whistles that yet to be explored in it, sitting there ripe for taking. So who gets it? Well, if you're inside of a, quote, kingdom, the odds are real good that the lord of the land can then reattach that property because the current owner's deceased or no longer available, and pursuant to the local legal code, whatever works for you. Then they can just award that to the characters as in lieu of a whole slew of cash. This also goes to keep in mind that running a tower or keep or thieves guild or temple takes upkeep, lots of money, and you got to keep that flow coming in, right? So one of the reasons why some adventurers continue on their adventuring path is to keep the revenue coming in, to keep their investments going. This is where the retainers come in and the henchmen come in. Mercenaries come in. Anyway, I hope that helped a little bit there. izzycat, izzycat. I love the title, man. I do. Till next time, guys. Till next time.